it's a paradox, right? Because many of us, we can acknowledge that there are parts of our inner child that is wounded, but the more healing that we do, the more that we realize that, yes, there were layers on top of that child that we needed to move through. But once we pulled those layers back, we started to realize, oh, there's a divine child that came into this incarnation complete, worthy, powerful, abundant, full of unconditional love already, right? So the more inner child work that we do, we come back to this truth, right? And we can decide, like I said, with the archetypes, we can decide to embody that at any given moment throughout our day.
Welcome to the Cosmic Love Antenna Podcast. This podcast is meant to encourage you to connect within so you can share your light with the world. And now, here's your host, Harrison Ma.
Welcome, beautiful beings, back to another episode of the Cosmic Love Antenna. You've found yourself on your weekly installment of your beautiful, loving inner connection to your outer expression, where I, your host, Harrison, here with the lovely guest that I'm joined with today, set the loving intention of pulling back the layers, restricting health, alignment, and love. And today is an extra bonus episode, a new idea, a new project, new theme, framework of the show that I'm testing out today with the intention of giving you as much value and as much guidance as possible. Today, what I've done is I've brought on a lovely member of the community of the show to go deeper into all things, a particular topic, which I'll get to in a sec. But the idea is this is a community coaching episode. So the beautiful being that I get to have a chat with today is from the tribe of the podcast, tuning in, listening in. She's on her own journey. And we're going to tune into the themes of the inner child today. And the beautiful Jennifer is going to share her story here in a second. But she has some questions on her heart that I'm going to answer to give her some beautiful value, but also to give you, the listener, you, the audience, you, the tribe, some deeper awareness and deeper solutions around this inner child topic. So with that, Jennifer, welcome to the show. Thank you for doing this. And how are you feeling, my friend?
Thank you for having me. I'm feeling excited to be here because you know that I love this conversation, and especially having it with you because you offer so much wisdom and insight, and you've helped me on my journey a lot. So I'm very grateful to be here.
Well, Jennifer, let's get straight into it. Let's give a quick overview of that journey just for people listening, because I'm very intentional with who I pick to do this episode with and connect with and collaborate with. And you've been on this inner child journey to a degree, to say it very nicely, right, for a while now. So maybe give a quick overview of where you're at in your journey, then we'll jump into the questions.
I think where I'm at in my journey is a very good place, because starting out, there was so many things for me to learn that I just didn't understand, which you've helped me through. But where I'm at right now is a very peaceful place. I'm very confident in who I am. I'm starting to use my voice more and more about my spirituality and what I believe. And so I think that the healing is definitely taking place, and it's also taking place within my family, not just me.
That's a big part, right? And I'm sure we'll talk about that. But let me ask you one more question here, and then we'll get into all the things that are on your heart. Explain to the people, if you're comfortable with it, what were some of the main challenges and pains that you had to move through with the inner child, right? So, for example, I know there were some religious elements. What were some of the main sort of components of the inner child healing that you had to move through?
Definitely religion is what I'm discovering the biggest one, because I lived the majority of my life in fear of just about everything. So definitely religion, some neglect, there was a lot of addiction and abuse in the family. And then there was some sexual abuse as well.
Thank you, my friend, for answering honestly. So this is, for people listening, I'm sure you can relate to Jennifer, right? I know I can, right? I know that this is why the inner child topic we're talking about today, in my opinion, is so needed, right? Because inner child is both the root of the challenges, right? Most of those things that Jennifer just highlighted happened in her childhood. And it's also the solution, right? It's also the healing solution. So Jennifer, let's get into it today. Let's get into the questions you have on your heart. So what's first on your list?
First on your list, on my list, sorry, is for somebody that's like me who didn't realize that they were growing up in a family where there was neglect and abuse, and they didn't realize that they had inner child issues and until they started manifesting later in their life. How does one know? Like, what are some of the signs that somebody could look for to help them understand that they need to do some work with their inner child?
So I've shared this with you, and I'll share this with all the beautiful listeners. This is probably within the top 3 questions that I get all the time when it comes to this component of our healing journey. And it's a good one, right? And we must all ask it. And I was actually talking to my dad about this last night. The first, there's a few areas, right? There's 3 areas that we can look at in our life to see if we need this kind of healing, right? And I'll just say this at first. Statistically, fortunately, unfortunately, most of us have this kind of work to do, right? Just because of the world we live in at the moment, just because of the families, the cycle of trauma loops in the ancestral line. I'll say that first. Statistically, there's a high chance that it exists, right? That's not to overwhelm you. That's just to realize that, okay, this may be the next step I need. But if you want to move beyond that, there are 3 areas you can look at, right? The first is your adult relationships, right? Are you happy with your adult relationships? Are they functional? Are they positive? Are they giving you the relationships you deserve, right? Because if they aren't, if there is dysfunction, if there's tension, if you're constantly being triggered and things are coming up around your adult relationships, this would be a sign that the inner child and that past that you've had needs some attention. The second is your relationship with abundance, with money, with finances, with business, with bringing in the abundance that you are, right? Because let me be very clear with you, Jennifer, and I've shared this with you before, and the people listening, you are made of pure abundance and potential. If that is not manifesting in your life, there is something in the way, and most likely that thing in the way is an inner child challenge. The last area that you can look at for really seeing if this kind of work is for you is your physical body, right? The body keeps score. The body tells the story of your life. And if you are moving through a chronic dis-ease, a chronic challenge that despite all of the pharmaceuticals, all of the modalities, all of the sort of somatic physical tools that you've used, it continues to move through you, then this is a sign that inner child work is needed.
Yeah, I think I have all of those.
Does that resonate?
Yeah, all of them resonate.
And just before I get to your next question, that's exciting, right? I don't want people to see that as, oh God, I'm just a victim of this. No, that means you're now at the point where, okay, let's step into it. Let's do something about it, right? And that's what you did, Jennifer. That's what you did now I'll just share this with you because I love you so much. That is why you got so much results, right? Because you were ready to alchemize all of the pain that was coming up into healing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that leads me right into my next question, which is, as you know, reservations, being scared of once you realize, okay, I need to do some work with my inner child. It's scary not knowing what's on the other side, not knowing what to expect. So what would you say to somebody who's wondering, what's going to happen? What am I going to be doing? What should they expect?
So there's a lot to this question, but I'll try and keep it concise. The first thing I would say is that you're completely normal, right? As a coach in general, as a mentor, as someone who supports people daily, and as someone who's a human himself, right? This is, if there was no fear, if there was no tension around the unknown, then I would say there's something wrong. Right? Because we want that to be there, right? That means that we're stepping into something new. That means we're stepping into something that's valuable to us, right? So the first thing is to embrace, right? Is to embrace the fear, right? As within this kind of healing work, and we might speak more about it today, the hardest, the the biggest part of this kind of healing is surrendering into the tension, surrendering into the fear, surrendering into the resistance. Because 99% of the time, when we surrender into it, we realize, one, it wasn't as bad as we expected. And two, there's usually a treasure within that fear, within that tension that we need to see. So it's really acknowledging that, right? And then the second piece, in terms of what we can expect and what we need to do to move through this, is we need to understand that support is needed. Okay. And what I mean by this is I don't want to say that all this kind of work you can't do by yourself, because a big part of it is, taking these tools and implementing them. But for most people, I know you experience this, my friend, most people are so stressed out, are in such a flight or fight state, are in such a, I just finished a beautiful book called Narrowing Your Window, right? And what this means is, based off childhood trauma, our nervous system is in such a sensitive state, right? So we could do anything and we're going to react. We're going to go into a reactionary state where we can't see the answers that are needed. So what I'm getting at here is, this is why we must remember and realize that while we are a spiritual being, we are also a beautiful human being. And this human being has evolved for thousands of years. In what way? We've evolved in tribes. We've evolved in communities that were there to support each other. So the second part of this question, in terms of what to expect and what we must do, we must let ourselves be helped, right? Because if we don't let ourselves be helped, we will constantly stay in this stressed out state, and we won't feel safe enough in our body to feel the things that need to be felt and see the things that need to be seen.
Yeah. Oh, I just have to comment on that, because coming into this, trust was a huge issue for me. And it's not that I didn't trust you. It was just trust in general, because growing up in religion, when I would question anything as a child, I would be told, well, there's some things God just doesn't want us to understand. And so throughout my life, what that told me was that I can't trust what anyone says, because there's no clear answer. And once I started doing this work, I found it so easy just to express my true spirituality. And like you said, when we first started working together, don't release all expectations and be open. And I did. I was like, I'm going to trust this whole process. And I did that. And I am reaping the beautiful benefits of it right now, because I feel so free. I've never in my life felt this free. And I mean, it's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And Jennifer, I know you know this, but for people listening, what you tapped into there was your power, right? Remember what I said before about abundance being one of the reflections of this work that's needed. When money or a job or, material things are just one form of abundance, right? Another form of abundance is really tapping back into the power that we are, right? So you feeling this and you feeling this connection to your truth, that is you tapping into your abundant potential, right? And inner child healing work, just for everyone listening, is one of the pathways for us to acknowledge this and remember this, right? So yeah, I'm proud of you, my friend. What's your next question?
My next question is, what is your inner child? For somebody who has a hard time connecting and views their inner child as a separate person than themselves. Can you explain that?
So, like I said before, there's a top 3 questions I usually get around this, and this is one of the other top 3 questions. So I'm gonna answer this like I always do, from 2 lenses. I'm gonna answer it from a mental, psychoanalytical, psychological view, and then answer it from a spiritual lens, because I feel both are valid and both are a way for beginners to really set a foundation for doing this kind of work. So the psychoanalytical, psychological view is that the inner child, through the lens of Jung, right, is an archetype, right? An archetype is defined as the root language of consciousness, or how consciousness, that is us, right? We are consciousness in human form, is expressing itself through us at any given moment, right? So an archetype, the inner child, is one of many archetypes that we have, right? So we have an inner mother, we have an inner father, we have the teacher, we have the student, we have the wise woman, we have the wise man, we have, the many different ones that we step into either consciously or unconsciously throughout our lives. And with archetypes, we must ask the question, we must constantly be questioning ourselves, right? Is this archetype that I'm in right now, is it serving me? Or have I stayed in it too long and it's causing tension in my external reality? Okay, so that is really what the inner child is. And it's just one of the most famous archetypes that we can learn to embody and heal ourselves, or see where something is needed and something is not. Okay, that's the mental view. Okay, and that can help a lot of the mental structures. The more profound view of the inner child, which I've found has helped me a lot, and I know has helped you a lot, my friend, is the spiritual lens of the inner child. And the spiritual lens of the inner child is that the inner child is a fragment and is a channel for our divine being, is an aspect of our soul, is an aspect of the powerful spiritual being that we are, right? Again, I think it's Freud or Jung refers to the inner child as the divine child or the divine inner child. And that's basically what it is, right? It's a paradox, right? Because many of us, we can acknowledge that there are parts of our inner child that is wounded, but the more healing that we do, and you've come to this conclusion, my friend, the more healing that we do, the more that we realize that, yes, there were layers on top of that child that we needed to move through. But once we pulled those layers back, we started to realize, oh, there's a divine child that came into this incarnation complete, worthy, powerful, abundant, full of unconditional love already, right? So the more inner child work that we do, we come back to this truth, right? And we can decide, like I said, with the archetypes, we can decide to embody that at any given moment throughout our day.
Yes. I have found that, going into my next question, I have found that just letting things come as they come and handling them that way is a lot more gentle with ourselves and easier to heal and process than going and looking for things. And so you probably know where I'm going with my next question.
Yes, I can feel it.
Which is, if you don't remember, you know that you've had some things occur in your childhood, but you can't remember them all. So where do you start if you're having trouble with your memory of those events?
So I want to touch on that piece of going looking, right? And feeling like we need to do all the things. And I've fallen into this. So this is another archetype, actually. This flows beautifully. I love your questions today, my friend. This flows beautifully into another archetype. Once we start to heal, whether it's inner child or any of the other healing modalities I talk about, we obviously start to feel empowered. But then the energy starts to become unbalanced on the other side of things. We move into the archetype of the superhero, right? Not the superhero saving others, superhero in saving ourselves, right? And we feel like we must do all the things all the time. And if we're not doing all the things all the time, we're not healing, or we're not progressing further down our path. And this could not be further from the truth. Like you just highlighted, my friend, is the only thing we ever need to be doing is the thing that is needed right now in this moment, right? The thing that's coming up, right? So if I've walked into a room with my dad, for example, and my dad is making me angry and there's some anger coming up, I don't need to worry about, what is the origins of that? I don't need to worry about the other emotions that might be behind the anger. No, I just need to focus in on the anger that I'm feeling in my body in that moment. Okay. So that's a part of your answer to your question. The second piece, in terms of not remembering, I want to make this very clear for people tuning in. This is such a common, and in most cases, a protection mechanism that our beautiful body implements to actually help us from re-traumatizing ourselves in many ways, right? Based off what you've experienced in your childhood, like you talked about the sexual elements, my friend. Most of us have, unfortunately, we've experienced both a small t trauma, which is certain needs not being met that we deserve to have, and also the big T trauma, which would be, sexual abuse, rape, assault, severe accidents, right? All these sort of things. So the memory disassociation is actually a protection mechanism to stop us from re-traumatizing ourselves. So we must trust that. We must trust that and realize that we are only ever given what we are ready for. So trusting that when I get to the point where I have the tools to deal with that challenge, then that is when the memory will come back. That is when the event and the experiences and the things I'll need to move through will come up for me to see. Until then, I'm only ever wasting energy worrying, thinking about why is it not happening? Why is it not there? And getting lost in the what ifs.
Yeah, I love the way you put that, because sometimes we do get triggered by something and we're not exactly sure what. And so I love the way you put that. That's beautiful. Just, acknowledging that we don't have the tools to face that yet. So,
and just another piece on that, Jennifer, this is why we seek support. This is why that, we don't know what we don't know. But what we can do is we can open our heart and notice where we feel good, right? So for you, I'll just share your part of this, Jennifer. I know that one of the main reasons you reached out to me was because, you really felt something in the spaces we held together, right? You really felt, emotions and things come up that were not coming up in other spaces and places, right? This is something we all can learn to do, right? We can all learn to trust our heart and notice where something feels good without knowing all the answers, right? Because that is also a trap that we fall into, right? We might feel good around someone, but then our mind will come in and say, oh, but I don't have the money, or I don't know if that person's right for me. I don't know. No, we need to learn to trust the heart and then realize that, and this is one of my favorite Rumi quotes that you'll probably love, my friend, is the way appears once we start walking it.
oh,
Right?
I do. I love that.
Yeah. Right. So that way, we find that way by following our heart.
Yeah. It's like so many of my friends, they always say, oh, I want to try yoga, but I'm not flexible. And I'm like, you don't do yoga because you're flexible. You practice yoga to become flexible.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, same thing. That is a beautiful Rumi quote. One of the other things I wanted to talk about today is the ancestral part, because that's the part that I'm experiencing right now. And I mean, I didn't expect that. I always heard you talk about it before in your rooms on Clubhouse. It's one of the things that I didn't quite understand. And even when we were doing the coaching and we were in the container and we were constantly in communication and stuff, I was starting to understand it, but not fully yet. Some things is a little bit slower for me. And now I'm just seeing it. It's just happening. And I'm not even trying to do anything. I'm just healing myself. And I'm seeing all of my family members start to heal as well. And it's blowing my mind. And we have this beautiful harmony now in my family. It's beautiful.
So you want me to break down or just comment on it, my friend? You want to?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm so excited for you, just so you know, and I've shared this with you before, but this is really, in the work that I do, these two pieces are just, the core components, right? The inner child and the ancestral healing. And it's because it's so impactful, like you're saying, right? This is not a Jennifer thing. This is something that we can all access. And I'll explain what it is just for people tuning in. I would highly encourage you, if this chat is resonating and you're new to the show or you're new to my voice, I've done episodes on this, right? I've done episodes both on the inner child and ancestral healing. So go back and listen to those solo episodes. But I'll give a summary, right, of these, how the inner child connects to ancestral healing and really what's going on here. So the first thing that comes up is in our childhood, if we have experienced some kind of abuse that has involved our caregivers, either with the small t or the big T trauma, one of the biggest elements to lean into and to help with our healing is obviously forgiveness for them. But how do we do that? Well, one of the ways we start to remember is that hurt people, right? And if my mom or my dad abandoned me or created a rejection wound, then we can ask the question, what is the chance that they are creating or activating that wound inside of me because it's also inside of them, right? It's also inside of them within their upbringing, right? So just that realization alone for a lot of people within the inner child healing can help us forgive, right? Can help us let go, right? Because most of us are holding a lot of resentment and anger and a lot of emotions towards our caregivers. And I'm right there with you if you are, but it's understanding that the pain that you're experiencing from your caregivers, it's passed down the ancestral line, right? And that's why, going back to the start of the conversation, that I feel this kind of work is so needed right now, because it's stacked up, right? It's been stacking up for a while, and now we're all reaching a boiling point where we realize it's time to do the work. So that's the first sort of connection here, right? The second connection is, I'll explain this from a spiritual lens and a physiological lens, right? Any person that's sort of listening to this show or is in the health and wellness realm, you've probably heard the word of, genetic disposition and epigenetic disposition, right? This is really what is passed on. We don't just pass on, physical traits, right? We also pass on energetic, emotional, and mental traits. So if my mum has experienced an inner child wound of rejection, and she has left that unhealed for whatever reason, right, that is passed on to the children, right? So exactly what I just said before. And based off my life choices in my upbringing, in my adulthood, I will switch on that epigenetic switch of that mental and emotional trait. Okay, so just speaking really scientific from that lens, that's how that works. But it also is passed on through our subtle energy bodies, right? We have a physical energy body that people can relate to, but we also have many others, including mental, emotional, and a soul body. These are also what hold these energetic blueprints or these energetic pains and traumas that are passed down to me. Okay, so without going too deeply into a class around that, that is really the mechanism, right, of how they're passed on. So with that understanding, going back to what you said, Jennifer, we can now realize that yes, I can engage actively with my parents, right? I can sit down with them, and I could sit down with my mum in a room, and we can both do an inner child letter together, and we can embody our little inner children, and we can express and cry and feel and do all the things. And that is how both my mum and myself, we heal together actively. However, as Jennifer just explained at the start here, you can also do this passively, right? Meaning that the more that you focus on your self-love, your self-care, your inner child healing work, that also heals her, right? And this is why self-love is never selfish, because even in your inner child healing work that you're doing by yourself, because of that epigenetic genetic connection and that subtle energy body connection, when I heal my rejection wound with my inner child, now I'm healing down the ancestral line energetically forwards and backwards with that same wound, right? So as Jennifer said, I will now see that change reflected in my mother, even if I never talked to her about it. Even if she's unaware of the work that I'm doing, it will impact her down that genetic line, right? And the last thing I'll say here, I'll pass it back to you, my friend, is this also obviously occurs with our children, but not just the children we're yet to have, the children that we currently have, right? The children that we currently have that also are connected through that link, right? So yeah, I'll land it there, but this is really what's going on.
Yeah, it's just incredible. It honestly is. And everything that you just said reminded me of the activation where I saw my mother spiritually for the first time, and we were around the same age, and it was like I could see all of a sudden that we were the same. And it's like this.
And Jennifer's,
anger.
Sorry to interrupt you, but what was what was the form that she took as the inner child? Was it a hurt, wounded one, or was it something else?
No, she wasn't hurt or wounded at all. She was very strong. And it's like she was standing in front of me saying, it was like she was just saying that you are me, I am you, this is us. And it's like, it was just so loud and clear to me. And this pain and rejection and these stories that I had created in my life, that my mother didn't love me and all these things, they were just gone. It's like, I couldn't see anything else but that we were the same, and that what I experienced growing up as a child, she too experienced growing up as a child. And we became one. And from that moment on, it's gone. It was that simple. It was just acknowledging that everything that you just explained, that it's built upon, and somebody has to break it.
Yep. And it's, another way to explain this for everyone, just to get this even more, the reason that Jennifer was able to experience what she just experienced is because the deeper we go into our healing, the deeper we go into ourselves, the deeper we go into our energetic and spiritual healing in many ways, right? The emotional, mental, and physical are pathways to this. The more that we realize that time inside of us is not linear, right? Everything that's existed. I don't want to get too cosmic and woo woo here. I know this is my show, but because I want to hear more questions from you, my friend. But the deeper we go into ourselves, the more that we realize that everything in our past and everything in our future from a quantum perspective is folding into the present. So everything that exists everything that will exist and everything that has existed exists in my heart, inside of me, and I can access it. That's what you access. That's what you saw, right?
Yeah, I love it. I just am in love with all of this whole process, which is so funny for somebody who is so resistant coming into it. But for my next question, because I can get very spiritual, triggers. We were talking about triggers just a little bit ago. And so when you are being triggered by something and you don't know what you're being triggered by, but you just know that it's something that's there, you need to work through it, agitation, whatever it is. What do you do whenever you feel triggered by something and you don't know what it is?
So I'll go back to something I shared before. The first thing is to see it for the treasure that it is, right? And apparently this is an episode full of quotes. Another one I'll throw out for people, one of my favorites is the cave that we fear to enter holds the treasures that we seek, right? It's from Joseph Campbell. And that is really the first step with any kind of trigger, right? We need to see it for the value. Because if we, like you said, if we have resistance, if we judge the trigger, if we blame the trigger, if we shame ourselves for being triggered, then that's just going to add another layer on top that's going to stop us from seeing what is needed to be seen or feel what is needed to be felt. So that's the first step, right? It's loving acceptance, right? I'm a big fan of, I would encourage people to go back and listen to the episode I did around the 7 A's of healing. And I quote Mr. Gabor Mate, and in it, he talks about, which I'll actually explain here with the triggers and how to handle this. He talks about the 7 A's, and the first 3 really apply to triggers specifically, right? So the first is acceptance, which we just said, right? Loving acceptance for what is, right? That doesn't mean we're accepting the future, but what it says is that we are allowing ourselves to be with this moment so we can make a change, right? So that's the first step. Step 2 is, and the second A is awareness, right? And awareness is bringing conscious attention and mindfulness and somatic sort of energy to where that trigger is in the body. Because most of us aren't just triggered, in a void, right? We're triggered somewhere in the body, right? We feel a tension in our chest. We feel a closing in our throat. We feel a sinking in our stomach. We feel, we feel our palms sweating, right? There's often a somatic link to the trigger that we're having. So when you can bring awareness to what that is, not only can you start to open healing for it, you can start to allow the thoughts, the beliefs, the stories, and the repressed emotions behind that trigger to flow, right? And then the third step here is, which is the third A, is anger, right? And I don't specifically mean the emotion of anger. Yes, anger might come up in that trigger, but what I'm getting at here is anger is an example, as with most emotions, of a really misunderstood way of handling emotions, right? Most of us suppress anger, or we take anger out as rage on other people, but we forget that anger has a balanced state, right? Anger allows us to express our truth and to channel the energy of the emotion that needs to be channeled. So what this shows us is what you can learn to do in that moment once you bring awareness to the trigger is create the space for that emotion to flow, right? So if it's sadness, for example, it's crying, it's releasing, right? If it's anger, it's expressing that anger. If it's guilt and shame, it's acknowledging that guilt and shame. So the point here is creating a space for the emotion, which is energy in motion, to move up and out of you rather than suppressing and ignoring.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I feel like I went through all of those.
Yeah. You are not alone, Jennifer, right?
Yeah.
This is why those steps really apply to most people. It's because this is a muscle, right, that we can build. Jennifer, I think we have time for one more quick question here, and then we'll wrap it up.
This is a question I have not asked you before.
Mm.
So how does one know when they're starting the healing process?
Ooh, so that's a question, and there's a lot bubbling up. So the first thing I would say is I actually don't think there is a point where we start. So what I mean by that is, and I'll answer this from a spiritual lens, why are we here? Right? I know that's a very esoteric question, but I will answer it by saying, as a spiritual being having a human experience, we are here to be in soul school. We are here to be on this stage of life, to experience the things that need to be experienced, to learn the lessons, to expand and ascend. So I actually believe as soon as we're born, as soon as we leave the womb, actually, I would say as soon as the soul enters the body, which may be in the womb, we are already healing. And what I mean by that is, like I said before, there's a compound effect of the soul that comes into this incarnation, meaning that we don't come in as a blank slate. We come in with things to get done, right? We come in with karma to resolve. We come in with trauma to heal. We come in with ancestral chains to break, right? So from the moment that we start this incarnation, we are already healing, right? There's already something going on that we're moving through. I think the thing that is fluctuating is our awareness of it, right? Is our awareness of the layers that we're moving through. So to answer the question more succinctly here, I think when that begins is when we decide to actively go within instead of pushing all of our energy outside, right? Most of us, we live in a world, and this is one of my mentors. He has taught me this, and I cannot think could not be more true in my opinion. Once we stop externalizing the self, right, onto a person, place, or thing, looking outwards, and actually revert that and start looking inwards, that's when the awareness of the healing journey begins, in my opinion.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. But I knew that when I asked you that question, you were going to add on a whole new layer to it that I wouldn't have thought about, and you did.
Thank you for asking it, my friend. And that's I haven't answered that before, so that tested me. Jennifer, I love you very much. Thank you for coming on the show today. Thank you for asking all of the beautiful questions. I know that you always do. And my intention for this show was to not just help Jennifer more deeply, but all of you listening out there. So I hope you got value out of this. I'm definitely going to do more of these community coaching episode. If you got value out of this and you would like to come on the show to with one of these kinds of episodes, what you can do is, one, please share this episode out with some friends and family members that you think it can help. But two, you can leave reviews on Apple and Spotify, leave your comments. And what I'll start doing is I'll start picking people from the reviews and bringing people on to do these kinds of shows with. But with that, beautiful beings, I'm wishing you a wonderful evening, morning, and night, wherever you are in the world. Jennifer, again, thank you for spending time with me. And until next time here on the show, sending love, sending light, and we'll catch you very soon. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Cosmic Love Antenna podcast. We hope you enjoyed. Be sure to follow Harrison on Instagram, Twitter, and Clubhouse at Harrison Ma. That's Harrison, Meagher.